Marco Polo. Marco Polo. We all know the name, but who exactly is Marco Polo? What did he do for us to remember him? And finally, why is what he did so significant to our time on Earth now? Well, here's an answer. Here is the life and impact of Marco Polo. Marco Polo was born in 1254 in Venice, Italy, to a wealthy merchant family. He grew up his whole life never having met his father until he was about 15 years old. His father, Niccolo, along with his uncle named Maffeo, were traveling and exploring the rest of the known world in the East for a little over 15 years, having departed shortly before Marco was born. Not much is known about Marco's childhood and adolescence until about 2 years after he met his father in 1269. In 1271, in the height of the Mongol Empire, a 17-year-old Marco Polo engaged on a journey towards the east that would not only change his life, but inspire an entire new age of exploration. Marco, along with his father and uncle, headed toward the Mongol court in China. They traveled abroad the Silk Road, which is not specifically a road, but rather a network of various routes connecting Eastern Asia as far as various parts of Europe and even Africa. After a roughly 3.5 year journey, they finally arrived, and for a long 16 years, Marco Polo served the great Kublai Khan with various diplomatic tasks. Also, Marco Polo entertained the emperor by telling him stories of what he had seen on his journeys. Kublai Khan also wanted Marco to inform him on how his people were living. Marco and his family encountered a huge culture shock that when they arrived home 24 years later, they had fully embraced themselves in the culture, as far as coming home barely speaking any of their native tongue and speaking a language of the Mongol Empire. It is here where, unlike the rest of the European explorers in Asia, Marco Polo set himself a level higher by encountering a man while he told his intriguing stories of his travels. Sometime around 1298, Marco Polo had become a commander of a Venetian ship used in the war against Genoa. Due to this, he was detained in a Genoese prison. When allotted time, Marco Polo would entertain the many prisoners by narrating the fascinating stories of his travels in the East. Amongst this audience of prisoners was a man named Rustichello. Marco and Rustichello famously collaborated to bring these people of their time the famous Books of the Marvels of the World, or more popularly recognized as The Travels of Marco Polo. This book told vivid stories, describing never-before imagined animals and even humans. The contents of Marco Polo's books served as a primary source for people of Europe to understand and acknowledge the advancements and developed form of living these people had in the Mongol Empire. History.com states that Marco Polo introduced the Europeans to things such as paper money, coal, postal service, commerce, geography, and even eyeglasses. He also told stories of the warfare that he encountered. It is believed, however, that Polo and Rustichello may have exaggerated some tales in the book, and also maybe took encounters from other travelers who went to Asia. Nevertheless, the book got Marco Polo to become a historic figure for exploration and odysseys. The emperor of the Mongol Empire had been dead for some time once Marco Polo had arrived back to Venice. The passing of the Khan led to the Mongol Empire basically dissolving and slowly dividing itself until it no longer was. This division called for the end of the Silk Road, and a steady route of travel and trade, therefore, no longer existed. Nevertheless, this led to a shift in time as to what we now recognize to be the age of exploration. Europeans could no longer rely on the Silk Road, so they set their sails west of Europe to see if it was possible to still trade their goods, or hopefully still sell them. The end of the Silk Road led to this movement, but it was really the writings of Marco Polo that inspired these various explorers to do as he did and create legacies of their own. In 1299, peace was declared and Marco Polo was no longer a prisoner of war. He returned to Venice and married a woman named Donata Badur, and they had 3 daughters together. They were named Fantina, Moretta, and Belella. Marco Polo spent the remainder of his lifetime as a businessman and died on January 8, 1324. All that is known about Marco Polo is derived from his own book and Venetian records. However, his name is not mentioned in any Asian texts or records. leading some people to question if Marco really worked for the Great Khan, or even if he made it to China at all. These skeptics use his own text against his case by identifying inaccuracies in his stories and how he failed to mention Asian staples such as chopsticks, tea, and foot binding. However, believers in Marco Polo's tales have the support of archaeological, geographical, and historical records on their side. So it is safe to say that at least most of what Marco Polo wrote about in his book and his journey are true.